That should be our biggest problem,
Yes.
lack of space, because
Here we
we've
go.
got,
We moving or staying
right now you're here today,
today?
okay?
Tomorrow we don't know. Yom by yom.
Right. Okay,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
All right. Today's the 11th, right? Okay, good morning, gentlemen. We're going to start with our learning sponsors. A year of learning by the Friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece Leah Bracha, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister Chaya Rachel Bas Isser, Friends of Leonie Meiselman, Leah Saber Bas Chanoch Zundel. 2 months of learning by the Friends of Milton Meller in honor of his second bar mitzvah. A month of learning by Rabbi Dr. Yankee and Malki Honig in memory of his sister Chava Bas Harav Simcha Ben Yamin, his brother Tzvi Aaron Zev Ben Harav Simcha Ben Yamin, his father Harav Simcha Ben Yamin Ben Harav Yosef Yitzchak, her mother Sosia Bat Choyne. Be Pizer, a month of learning in memory of her sister Rivka Bas Avram Michal Halevi. Mendel and David Cheslow in memory of her father Nechemia Ben Mordechai Yonah Halevi. Haran and Mel Haller in memory of her mother Malka Rachel Bas Yehuda Leib. Yossi Goldstein in memory of his father Moshe Tzvi Ben Dov. A week of learning by Clara and Jonas Wazer in memory of her father Moshe Ben Yisrael HaKohen. Mira Ann Heschel Sennett in memory of her mother Shosha Bas Avram Alevi and his mother Reitza Bat Yitzchak Yaakov. Anita and Morris Kornblit, Leora and Lee Weinberg in memory of their dear friend and teacher Rabbi Dr. Ron Bronner, Rav Yirachmiel Ben Shmuel Yosef. And that is it for today, as it is the 11th, right? May Hashem is heaven aliyah, Krank Rafiel, Velti Yeshir, Hashem Atzliah, and L'chol B'nai Israel, good Gaben Shtia.
Amen.
Okay.
No voice.
Okay. So we are, in terms of any movement, gentlemen, to another location, we are in negotiations. I'll put it that way. Okay? All right. Okay. So that's item number 1. Item number 2. Okay, a reminder again that 2 weeks from yesterday is going to be the Siyum on the 24th at 3 o'clock at Orchid Gardens. If you plan to attend, you need to give Heshi $30 in advance.
Not that Hershey, this Hershey.
Okay? All right? Women, wives, girlfriends, fiancés, Saros, right? 3 o'clock, right? Mel?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so that's the case. All right, all right. Okay, all right. Okay, let's get to our Gemara Ayin Chet. Amud Aleph today is our Gemara. However, I want to remind us what we were talking about. Okay, let's go back real quickly to Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Okay, where it says towards the end of the 3rd line, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chacham Shamar B'Lashon Baal, U'Baal Shamar B'Lashon Chacham. We basically explained that if a sage uses the inappropriate formula for making a revocation instead of an annulment, or if the husband uses the inappropriate formula for a annulment, for a revocation, and I said it wrong. If the sage uses the inappropriate formula for annulment, but instead used revocation, or if the husband used the language of annulment instead of using revocation, in both cases it doesn't work. Okay? Lo amar klum, says the Gemara. Right? The Tanya, why? Because the text says ze hadavar. This is the thing, the word. Echacham matir ve'ein ba'al matir. Okay, so the Gemara goes on. The sage, okay, finds a petach in order to annul the vow, And in that case, it's like the vow never even occurred initially. Baal matir. But the husband, what does he do? He revokes the vow, implying that there is some period of effectiveness for the vow once the woman has stated it, and then he revokes it. Then he shuts it down. Sheyechol, why? Because we might have thought, Uma chacham she'ein mefer matir, that since a sage, okay, since he does not revoke, he is able to annul. Baal, a husband, shemefer, who is able to revoke, a no din shematir, shouldn't it be possible for him logically to annul?
No.
Okay. In other words, if he can cancel, right, things like that. Talmud Lomar, and we get now to the top of Ayin Chet, where we stopped yesterday. Zeh hadavar. This is the word, the statement, the language. Chacham matir ve'ein ba'al matir. A sage is the one who annuls. In other words, ve'ein ba'al matir, and the husband is not one who annuls, he is one who revokes. Okay? Tanya Ida. Well, let's see. Let's go on with the Gemara and see if it agrees with it or not. Okay? Right? Tanya Idach. We have a Braita that teaches as follows. Zehadavar. This is the word, the thing, the lashon, the formula. Baal mefer ve'ein chacham mefer. A husband revokes, but a sage does not revoke. Sheyechol, we might have thought, it might be possible. Uma baal she'ein matir mefer, that whereas a husband is not able to revoke, okay, he is, able to annul, he is able to revoke, okay? Chacham, a sage, shematir, that's able to annul, a no din shemefir, shouldn't it be possible for him even to revoke? Talmud Lomar, Zeh hadavar, says the text, Zeh hadavar, this is the word, the language lashon. Baal mefer, a husband revokes, ve'ein chacham mefer, but a sage does not revoke. Ne'amar kan. So now, having said that, we continue with a piece in the Gemara to further discuss the use of the language Zeh hadavar. And we're going to see, is it possible to make a gezerah shava using that language? I think, Ron, there's a place, right? All right, using that language to present other parallels, other situations. Okay, so the Gemara says, Ne'amar Khan in Vayikra Yud Zayin. It says that's, of course, dealing with our whole issue of, right? Zeh hadavar, v'ne'amar lahalan. And it's said also elsewhere, Zeh hadavar, b'shchutei chutz. And that's the use of that language is found in regards to the concern about any slaughter of animals outside the Azara, okay, outside the temple precinct, okay, that renders it not a non-viable offering, right? Right. That's what the Gemara is going to ask. Okay, is it, in other words, just because the language is the same, is it really a valid gezerah shava? Okay. Plus, what's going to happen is they're going to point out in that language, in the pasuk, it's specifically referred to Roshei Hashvatim, the heads of the tribes. Okay, can we? How does that fit in to this situation?
Isn't the gezerah shava something that we have to have a Messiah for?
That's also the case, right? That's going to be.
Do we have a Messiah this way or not?
Shouldn't the Gemara ask that question?
Yeah, that's good.
Gezerah shava Adam done gezerah shava. A person can make a gezerah shava his own.
a person could make a gezerah shava on their own based on the fact that they have a Masorah that at least one part of the gezerah shava, one part of the language in the gezerah shava is superfluous. Okay? Usually, okay, we're going to see the Gemara slips that shaila in here too. Okay? So what happens? Says the Gemara, Ma b'shchutei chutz Aharon uvanav b'chol Yisrael. The same way, if we go back, and Art Scroll cites the psukim, okay, in one of the notes, I didn't write down which note, okay, right, so it's probably 78, 4 or 5, around there, okay. So the same way, when it talks about shchutei chutz, that any offerings made outside of the appropriate area seems directed to not only Aaron and his sons as the Kohanim, but also to Chol B'nai Yisrael. What do we learn from that? Af Parashat Nidarim, Aharon Uvanav, B'chol Yisrael. So likewise, we can apply using, if we accept this Gezerah Shava, we can therefore say that that's what allows Aaron and his sons, in other words, leaders parallel to the Chachamim, and Kol Yisrael and the Jewish people, which would give us the parallel to the 3 Hedyotot on a Beis Din. Okay, so I might use that Gezerah Shava as a basis to claim this is how I get somebody to annul the vow.
They might not be in the category
Well, we'll see. But I have a methodology. That's the Gemara wants to show us. I have what? Right. So the language of the pasuk allows me, using this Gezerah Shava, to say I have Aaron Uvanav, which I can therefore use, as I'm saying, as a parallel to a Chacham. And then I have B'nai Yisrael in the pasuk to use as a parallel to the 3 Hedyotot. Okay? That's assuming that I accept the Gezerah Shava. Okay? Now, what's going to happen? I might challenge that Gezerah Shava. If I challenge the Gezerah Shava, what does it mean? I can't use that as a basis to show the Chacham and the Hedyotot. So I'm going to have to then rely on other psukim, at least theoretically. Let's see if that's the case, right? All right, so now we go on. Umakan Roshei Hamatot. So now we're exploring or detailing the Gezerah Shava. And whereas here, what we're talking about is the heads of the tribes. Aflahalan Roshei Hamatot. So since we're talking about Aaron Uvanav, the Chol Yisrael, and that would include the head of the tribes, I'm going to use that to say, so here too, maybe that regards Nidarim, that gives me the head of the tribes, which means, right? B'parashat Nadarim, l'mai hilchata. So therefore, it regards the section of Nidarim. What then is the law going to be as to who can annul, right? Amarav Achabar Yaakov, he says, lahachshir shlosha hedyotot. So Rav Achabar Yaakov accepts the Gezerah Shava, and in doing so, uses that as a basis to say, therefore, that's why an assembly of 3 common people, Art Scroll's note, by the way, says they have to be knowledgeable to a certain degree of the laws of Nidarim and things like that, okay? But the implication is that's what gives him to use 3, let's call it civilians for the moment, all right? Vaha, but the Gemara says, but Roshei Hamatot Kativ, But our pasuk elsewhere, when it talks about Bamidbar and talks about shchutei chutz, as Marty is just pointed out to us with his question, does that not indicate, how can you say then, what isn't that making an exception? That really only they should have the authority to annul. Amar Rav Chisda, v'itema Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav Chisda says, and others say it was Rabbi Yochanan, biyachid mumche. That's where we derive the fact that it can be an individual who is an expert, okay, namely the sage, right? Roshei hamatot b'shchutei chutz lamai hilchata. If that's the case, if we can use that for Nadarim, what then is the status in the law regarding the heads of the tribes vis-a-vis this whole issue of shchutei chutz? Okay, what's the Gemara? Amar Rav Sheshet, says Rav Sheshet, Lomar sheyesh she'ela behekdesh. This, he says, Rav Sheshet, that this allows one the opportunity to ask for a annulment of a vow made for something given to the Mikdash, whether it be the Mishkan or whether it be the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so one could petition an annulment of a vow for something that's made hekdesh.
But not anything else.
We don't know. We don't know yet. Now, Lebeit Shammai. However, we've got another curveball, another question. Lebeit Shammai da'amar ein she'ela behekdesh. According to Beit Shammai, who says you cannot petition an annulment of a vow to hekdesh, Roshei Hamatot, where it's written Roshei Hamatot, dichtiv b'shchutei chutz lamai hilchata. Okay, when it then spells out Roshei Hamatot regarding shchutei chutz, okay, then what the law is, what does it apply to? Okay, Beit Shammai lit laho gzeira shava. So it tells us that Beit Shammai does not hold by this Gezerah Shava. Okay, that's the point. So we now realize not everybody accepts that Zehadavar Gezerah Shava. Okay, Zehadavar b'Parashat Nadarim l'mai k'tiv. So if that's the case, we'll ask basically for Beit Shammai, where it says Zehadavar regarding the Nadarim, what do they use it for? What's the purposes it's written there? Okay? Lomar Chacham Matir Ve'ein Baal Matir. They use that to tell us the same halacha, but they're using a different source, namely that a sage is able to annul, but a husband is not able to annul. Baal Mefer Ve'ein Chacham Mefer. A husband revokes, but a sage, does not revoke. Okay? Zehadavar. So now we come back to, if you don't accept, like Beit Shammai, the Gezerah Shava, then what do you do with the other phrase of Zehadavar regarding Shchutei Chutz? Okay? So they asked that Shaila. Zehadavar b'Shchutei Chutz l'mai kativ. So when it's there, what do you use it for? Why is it written? Lomar al hashchita chayav ve'ein chayav al hamalika. That implying that one would be transgressing, okay, if they had slaughtered the animal, but when they do simply malika, the thumb job with the on the animal, on a bird, then one would not be chayav if they did it outside the so to speak precinct of the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash.
In the beginning, we asked Kal V'chomer on the husband. Wouldn't it be better to ask the Kal V'chomer on the rabbi?
We'll see if the Gemara does.
He can do it beforehand. Why, of course, can't he do it afterwards, just like the husband?
Okay, well, let's see. Ela Beit Shammai. What does it come? So the Gemara has another question. So we just used previously that Gezerah Shava to show that 3 Hediotot can annul a vow. But if Beit Shammai doesn't hold by that particular Gezerah Shava, where are they going to base the idea or the procedure that 3 Hediotot can do it? Right? That's our next question in the Gemara. Ela lebeit Shammai lahachshir shalosh hediotot minalan. Where is it from? Nafke laho midarav Asi bar Nasan. They derive it from a incident, okay, which we're going to get a long story now, based on an explanation given by Rav Asi bar Natan. And now we hear the following story. Dichtiv. Why? Because it's written. Excuse me. Vaydaber Moshe et Moadei Hashem el bnei Yisrael. The pasuk says, and Moshe spoke these, okay, these appointed times, I'm going to say, or the times of Hashem to the people, right? Vitanya. And we learn the following Braita. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, he says as follows. Mo'adei ne'emru, okay, my appointed times, it says, velo ne'emra Shabbat Bereshit imahem. But Shabbat, in other words, Bereshit, Shabbat connected with creation, in other words, the observance of Shabbat is not included in that reference to these appointed times. That's what Rabbi Yossi ben Glili is saying. Ben Azai Omer, Ben Azai says, Moadei ne'emru, they were talked about, these appointed seasons and times. Velo ne'emra parashat nidarim imahem. But the section of nidarim was not included in them. Okay. Now what happens? What along comes Rav Asi bar Nasan, Kashale Hamatnita. This particular Mishnah, then, the one we just said about Rabbi Yossi and Ben Azai, was problematic for him. Atalena Hadeach, Lakame de Rav Sheshet. He went and traveled to Nahardea to appear before Rav Sheshet to ask him to explain to him the precise understanding of this brayta. Okay? V'lo ishkachei. He did not find Rav Sheshet in Nahardea because Rav Sheshet had gone to Mechoza. Okay? So what did he do? Ata avrat abartre leMechoza. He went then and traveled from him, after him, to Mechoza. Amarle. And he said to him, Moadei Hashem ne'emru v'lo ne'emar Shabbat Bereshit imahem. Is it true what Rabbi Yossi ben Yossi Aglili said, that when it talked about the appointed time, seasons of Hashem, okay, in that section of the Torah, it did not deal with Shabbat at all? V'haktiv. But it's written Shabbat imahem, that it's also written Shabbat there. It makes a reference to it. V'tu, and furthermore, Moadei Hashem ne'emru, v'lo ne'emra parshat nidarim imahem. And what about what Ben Azai said? Okay, are we saying it's such that where it talked about the appointed seasons, that it made no reference in that general section of the Torah to vows? Vaha misitre kative. But it's written right along beside it. In other words, it's the very next section in the Torah. Okay, Mel, am I right? All right, I'm sure you'll remember. Okay, so what happens? Amarle hachikatan. So Rav Sheshet explains to him as follows, right? This is what we're talking about as we go to the new Amud. Moadei Hashem tzrichim kiddush beit din. What it's talking about is that these appointed seasons, okay, they require the sanctification of the court. In other words, it's clear that the Beis Din must determine based on seeing the moon at that time and declare when the new month will come. Once you declare the month, therefore, then you set the time when the holidays are going to fall. Okay? Shabbat Bereshit, but Shabbos itself, Ein Tzricha Kiddush Beit Din. Shabbat does not need the sanctification of the court because we know it's going to come every week at the same appointed time. Okay? Moedei Hashem Tzrichin Mumcha. Maybe we're going to say that the appointed seasons need a specialist, so to speak. In other words, you have to be familiar enough with the structure of the calendar, okay? And the whole, remember, we've all learned, at least I think at some point, that Rabban Gamliel, I believe, used to have in the attic of his place all sorts of diagrams and pictures of the different phases of the moon. And he would ask, a witness who said, oh, I saw the moon. Did it look like this? Did it look like this? So on and so forth. Okay? So the Gemara elsewhere has told us that it's not, just somebody walking in and says, hey, I saw the moon the other night. Okay? Point. Moedei Hashem Tzrichaim Mumche. The person doing the examination of the witnesses must be familiar, okay? Specialist. Ve'ein parshat nidarim tzrichin mumche. But in regards to the section of nidarim, we do not need a mumche. It's fine if you have a chacham that's a mumche. He can annul a vow on his own. But on the other hand, you don't need a mumche because we also have the practice that we can have 3 hedyotot. Okay? Afilu Beit Din hedyotot, says the Gemara. Even a Beit Din, a court of 3, okay, common people. Right? So the Gemara continues. Wait a second. Vahaba Parashat Nidarim, Roshei Hamatot Kativ. But wait a second. Regarding the section vis-a-vis vows, it's spelled out Roshei Hamatot, right? Because if we said that section and the one of Nidarim were connected, were one right after the other, then there's got to be Smichut Parshiot. There's got to be some connection between them. So what's the connection there? Asks the Gemara. Okay? Amar Rav Chisda. Okay? Says Rav Chisda. V'itema Rabbi Yochanan. What does that phrase, Roshei Matot, tell us? B'yachid mumche. It comes to tell us that there we're talking about an example where if we, instead of just the 3 hedyotot, we also have the viable alternative of annulment by a single sage who is an expert. Okay. All right. Now, okay. We're now going to get to a new piece in the Gemara. All right? Remember what happens. We said that the husband must revoke, or the father must revoke the vow bo bayom on that day. Okay? What happens if he's silent? We don't know whether that's a silence to confirm the vow or it's a silence to revoke the vow. Right? Maybe he's silent because he has to think about it and still feels that later on in that same day, same calendar day, which we determined, he could revoke it later. Or maybe, for example, if it's a situation as we saw in the Gemara, I'm going to add to a na'ara me'urasa, an engaged young woman, where you need both the father and the husband. Maybe one heard it in the morning, but one didn't hear, wasn't aware of it till later in the day. Okay? You need them both to revoke in that situation. Okay? So silence does not necessarily give us an answer whether there's confirmation or revocation. So now the Gemara wants to raise the following question. Amar Rabbi Chanina, he says, Hashotek almanat lamekat. Okay, what happens if the individual, the husband, let's use that as our example, decides to remain silent in order to distress or annoy the wife? Okay. Mefer afilu mikan va'ad asara yamim. According to Rabbi Chanina, he can revoke the vow any time at that point, even up to 10 days later, which clearly disagrees with what we saw as Bo Bayom. Meitiv Rava, and Rava now challenges and answers. Ematai amru meit haba'al netrokna reshut la'av. In our example, we said of an arusa, at what point did they say that when the husband dies, there is a transfer of all responsibility for revocation to the father? Bisman shalosh shama habal. That's in a situation if the husband never heard the vow. Oh, sheshama v'shatak, or that he heard the vow but was silent. Oh, sheshama v'hefer umeit bo bayom, or that he heard the vow, he revoked it, and he died on the same day. Okay? In all those cases, then all the responsibility for revocation falls on the father. Aval shama v'kiyem, but if he heard and confirmed the vow, osha shama v'shatak umeit bayom shel acharav, or that he heard the vow and was silent, perhaps because he wanted to annoy or distress, okay, and died the very next day, right? Ein yachol lahafer. Then the father is not able to revoke whatsoever. So the Gemara says and asks, "My love b'shotek almanat lamekat." So what do we then say? Okay, if he does not, say anything and he's silent for the reason to annoy her, okay? Lo b'shotek almanat lekayem. Do we not say then that it is an example of silence in order to confirm the vow? Ihachi hainu o shama v'kayem. If that's the case, then that's the very same thing as saying that he hears and confirmed it. Ela b'shotek stam. But rather we're saying it's a situation where he's simply silent, and we don't know for sure whether it's a confirmation or a revocation.
If he died the next day, why wouldn't we assume he was too sick to do anything about it? He's lying on his deathbed, perhaps, and he doesn't want to deal with this as he's dying.
Well, but the question then is, if it's an example of Na'ara Mu'rasa, as we said, then we got a real problem.
You would assume he's too sick, and the father, after his death, is able to be made fair.
I agree.
Yeah.
Once a vow is
Revoked, or confirmed.
The husband can never be annulled. Is that correct?
When it's a married woman,
A married woman.
okay,
never
if
be
it's
annulled.
confirmed by the husband, okay, he can't revoke it, right?
Can never be annulled, I said.
Can it be annulled?
Unless she went to a chacham.
The only way it could be annulled was then she would have to go to, right, as Ruvain said, go to a sage.
You would have to go to a sage.
It would have to be, it can't go through revocation and confirmation by the husband. It has to go through a different route, which is the annulment route.
But it can go after it's revoked?
No, in other words, if the husband confirmed the vow,
Yes.
okay, and then she decides, I don't want to do it, right? Is that charata, if that's regret? So therefore, then she would have to go either to a sage or to three hedyotot to get it a no.
Is that a Pesach?
It might be. Probably the charata itself could.
That's the
That-
argument.
That was the question. That's the Gemara raises that. Some felt it was valid, some felt it wasn't a valid. Okay,
And then I'm pursuing the same, you're saying that the final word is only by the sage
for annulment,
for annulment,
for annulment.
but the sage can annul after the father revokes, after the father confirms.
But he could only do so if the person who made the vow asks
Now,
for permission
Yeah.
to have the vow revoked.
but she asks for permission, the father is out of the picture already. She will not go to the father, she goes to a sage. Right.
Right, but remember the question, but there are other situations where the father is out of the picture. For example, let's say that she became a Bogeret in the meantime. Or let's say, okay, that would be one case. Or let's say another situation is that she was a Na'ara Mu'ureset, and the intended husband gave her a get to break the Erusin. And at that point, okay, she theoretically still falls under the aegis of the father, but say for some reason she leaves her father's household and goes on her own, even though she's not 12 and a half yet. Okay, once she's then independent, also the father loses his control.
I'm not talking about special cases.
Okay,
In a normal case, where the woman is a Bulgaris already, and the father confirms it.
no,
No.
Once she's a Bulgaris, father has no say.
I mean, the husband confirms it.
Right,
The
it's
husband
only the
confirms it.
husband once she's a
Once
Bulgaris.
the husband confirms it, it's finished.
Right,
She can never have it a no.
unless she goes to a sage
She can go to a chacham after
Right.
the father announces it.
after the husband, after the husband confirms it.
I'm getting it. After the husband confirms it, she can still go to a sage and have an.
I would think that would be possible, right? Oh, Shema v'kiyim ela b'shotek stam. That's where I'm going to just go on a little bit more, and we'll finish up. Meitiv Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda challenges and says the following: Chomer b'hakem mi behefer, ubehefer mi behakem. There's a stringency in regards to confirmation more than revocation. And and also with regards to revocation more than confirmation. Okay, and the Gemara is going to lead us just short a little bit. Chomer b'hakem, okay, shahashtika mekayemet. The stringency with regards to confirmation is that silence confirms. Okay, we saw this the other day. I made that point rather. Ve'ein shtika mevatelet. But silence does not cancel the vow. All right? And that's where we're going to stop today, and we'll pick up tomorrow, okay, with the rest of that. Finish this parak and then go on to the new parak.
How many hours you spend recording for us? 3?
No, it depends on what I'm using. Right now, because I find the material a little difficult, I have both arts. I have a copy of Art Scroll next to me when I prepare. And then on the computer, I have the entire Koren translation and notes as well. So when I get to certain sections, I look at both, okay, and then try to see. And if I still have a problem with that, then I try to go into the Ran and things like that. Yeah, I think we still. All right. When Michael told me this morning why he wasn't going, I said, I assume he's got a doctor's appointment. So he said, yeah, he's got a new internist. Because of his stomach issue. So I give it some, so I make sure. I said, oh, you're going to see the rear admiral. And he said, the rear admiral? I said, yeah. He said, so when you see the rear admiral, you know what you have to do. He says, what? I said, you go like this. He says, what's that? I said, that's a naval salute.
I think we need to explore another option.
Yeah.
To reconfigure the tables and share this way.
You think we can?
I think it can, because there's plenty of empty space if you look around. There's plenty of empty space. We could fit at least 10 to 12 more people in here, rather than going through the whole rigmarole of moving everybody around.
It could be another option. I was saying using what David just looked at me to tell me. Basically,
We have to make sure that we have enough room, because I have a wheelchair.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So
We'll
that
make room.
if you add another table, is there enough room? That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah.
Keep that in mind.
No,
I'm not doing it. There
No,
are people who are expert in.
No, I
Go ahead.
understand. So he's saying that basically that the 830 million is going to probably continue upstairs.
Upstairs, okay.
So in theory, that would make the base medrash available.
Right.
But apparently there's now been a request from people who go to the new subscribed minyan on Shabbos that they would like to have a morning minyan of their own, and they need a place.
Okay, gotcha.
So the quick question then would be, would they use the base midrash or would they use the auditorium? I guess that has to be worked out.
This is just another option to explore.
Right, but
It
that's
may not be viable, I'm not sure.
no, but I understand what you're saying, you know.
We can end it here, and move back a little bit, and look at all this dead space.
Right,
In
So-
consideration of moving.
right, no,
getting
but
the,
I'm also saying, you know, now,
And these tables are all big, look at the size of those tables.
yeah, no, these tables are gonna stay in, they're not gonna move these tables. Okay, but I'm wondering, like you say, if these tables were lengthwise, if that might make a difference, and then you could have theoretical people really more into this. If that would make a difference. All right, we'll have to give some thought. Mhm. Yes. That's the question. That's the, since it can unknowledgeably be able to revoke. So that's the question the Gemara is asking. Okay, that's one of the underlying questions. Their answer is because of the, if you accept the Gezerah Shava of Zeh Davar, you can't. Because it has to be, the formula has to be appropriate to the one who can do a nullification versus revocation. Remember, that for the annulment of the vow, first of all, the person has to come to either the three or to the one sage. Then the sage has to examine, question the person. Do you have regret? Would you have made the same vow under different circumstances? Did you really understand the impact, the import of making that kind of a vow. These kind, and only then if they find a peta, okay, some sort of opening that there is real regret, or there really is, no, I wouldn't have made that vow if I had known such and such, the circumstances were different. Only under that condition, those conditions, can the sage or the three annul the vow. Okay, so there's the whole process, the formula, if you will, is different. Whereas for the husband or the father, once he's aware of what she said, if he doesn't like it, he can just say, I revoke that vow.
I understand that, but I'm talking about the father's father.
Right.
For example, the father's not around, why can't the judge do it without all those questions?
He can't. That's the point. He can't. In other words, it's all right.
It's not a big problem.
Right. So that's it. Okay. Okay. Okay, guys. Okay, we'll see you later. You're always welcome. Seymour, are you okay? You've been going to the 8:30 Union? The 8:30 Union, I think, is upstairs.
Well, I know three places where they are not government.
Okay.
The third is having the work done this morning.
Oh, yeah, that's why he's not here?
Yeah, so my wife took me.
Mhm. You know, I was gonna tell you, somebody else told me they're dealing, forgetting names.
Oh,
Okay, he's in Israel part of the year. He'll come back to me, okay, another time. Okay, what? No. Charlie,
I see somebody named Reiner,
no,
formerly Reiner, in the past.
no, Charlie Burr. Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. Welcome back.
Good morning, good morning.